Today, our deputies showed extraordinary professionalism and great restraint as they exhausted every option to preserve this individual's life prior to this fatal outcome. Let me talk a little bit now about how we got here early this morning. Around 2:23 this morning, we get a phone call from the prayer center, the worship center here, where some reverends do spend the night here overnight. This is their place of residence. We get a frantic phone call that there's an individual that they don't recognize outside banging on the windows saying that he's going to kill them. So they call 911. Our deputies respond and arrive within minutes. Upon arrival, they end up making contact with the subject, who had entered through almost a 6-foot wrought iron gate, and he was behind the gate. So he was on the gate on the worship center side. They were on the street side of the gate. They start immediately beginning de-escalation techniques. They see that he has some type of sharp object. When it's out here at 2:30 in the morning, they couldn't immediately recognize what it is, even with the flashlight. They just saw it was some type of object, saw that it was some type of sharp object. They start giving commands for him to drop whatever's in your hand, drop it. He says, no, I'm not dropping it. He's acting extremely erratic at this point. He goes up and he kicks the gate, and then he retreats. So as he goes up towards the gate and lunges towards the gate, they retreat a little bit. They're creating some distance as they continue this de-escalation. The second time he goes up to the gate, he kicks it, he's able to kick it open. So now he moves even more closer to deputies. Again, at this time, acting extremely erratic. He's groaning almost like a gorilla, bouncing back and forth, mimicking the actions of a gorilla as they're continued telling him to drop this sharp object that he has in his hand. Not complying with any type of orders. So one of the deputies decides to deploy a bolo wrap. Bolo wrap is what we equip some of our deputies with. It's almost like that Spider-Man wrap. Extremely effective most of the times to stop that erratic person from going into traffic, or that person with a sharp object to be able to get them under control. Most days we sit here and we have a conversation and we're not in front of the media because these less lethal options work. This is rendered useless. It doesn't affect him at all. So as they're continuing to de-escalate, and they at times are retreating, they'll allow these de-escalation techniques to try to have an opportunity to work. As they continue to retreat, you see this barrier against the interstate. They're getting closer and closer to that barrier where they have nowhere else to go. At some point during this de-escalation process, they deploy a taser. The taser's rendered useless and ineffective at this point, and he's still bouncing around, mimicking the actions of a gorilla, acting extremely erratic. Again, ignoring every effort that they're trying to attempt to get him to drop this sharp object that he has in his hand. At some point, he ends up closing that distance, that unsafe distance that they have. Again, they have nowhere else to retreat. At this point, they have to be now more concerned with preserving their own life than this individual's life. So two deputies end up discharging their firearms, striking this individual, and this individual has succumbed to his injuries here. When I tell you about how professional they've conducted themselves, now facing someone who at some point is trying to kill these three deputies on scene, they switch now from preserving their own life to preserving this individual's life. They get him secure after they kick this sharp object out of his hand. They get him handcuffed and secured, and they immediately begin life-saving measures, CPR, until Hillsborough County Fire Rescue arrives on scene and deems him deceased because he has succumbed to his injuries. I think that we will release the video here shortly. I think we will end up using this video as an instructional video for deputies, law enforcement, for years to come. When I say here, and I stand here and tell you how proud I am of the men and women of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, it almost becomes desensitized because I say it so often. But it's incredibly, incredible to see how when you give the deputies the training that they need and equip them with these less lethal options and give them this equipment, this training, to see how they conduct themselves, there's no doubt in my mind this video will be used for training purposes for years to come. There's 2 deputies involved. We'll release those names that discharged their firearms. One had been here 17 years. One had been here only 10 months. A very young deputy. The other deputy that was on scene, she did not deploy her firearm, but she is the individual who tried to deploy that bubble wrap, even though it was unsuccessful. Again, could not be more proud of these deputies. Me as a sheriff, us as a community should be incredibly proud. It's amazing to see when you hire the right people and you give them the equipment and training that they need to see how they conduct themselves. When I say this was textbook, this was textbook. We'll release the names of these deputies in our efforts to continue to be completely transparent. We have an agreement with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that investigates all our deadly uses of force. They are on scene. They will be conducting the investigation. We don't know who this individual is. Does he have a prior criminal history? Does he have a history of mental health? We have no idea. We don't have him identified yet. We haven't found any type of identification. We'll use our rapid ID, the fingerprint system, to see if we can find out. But we now, in these preliminary investigative procedures that we implement, we'll try to figure out and get the answers why. I don't know if we'll ever have the answers why he didn't drop, and going back to what this sharp object was, there's a railroad not too far from here. What he was armed with was one of those railroad spikes, those really sharp railroad spikes. That's what he had in his hand. We could imagine the damage, the death that he could have caused with this railroad spike. So, again, a lot of unknowns right now. I don't have a lot of additional information, and again, until we get him identified and try to figure out exactly who he is, I don't know if we'll have a lot of those answers. There's some answers we may never know. Some questions: was this religious motivated? You know, why was he at a worship center? Was this something motivated by some type of religious hatred? I don't know. We know from talking preliminary to the priests that live here that when he was acting erratic and banging on the windows, he said he wanted to kill them, but he never said why. So at this point, it'd be irresponsible of me to say this was religiously motivated. So I don't know that. Again, as per our standard operating procedure and all our uses of force that our deputies are forced to have or deploy, they're placed on administrative leave with pay pending the outcome of the state attorney's office. State Attorney Lopez is on scene along with her investigators. She is here. That's the information I have at this time. If any of you have questions, I'm certainly open to answering anything that I may be able to.
What church was this?
This is a worship center. This is a worship center. We will put that out. I'll put that out here. Here, a worship center here in Plant City. The reverends do live here. They're housed here, but they also conduct worship here. Matter of fact, unfortunately, because of what has happened here today, their 7:30 mass we had to cancel because we have such a large crime scene here that extends into the roadway and almost up to the barrier wall here going on to Interstate 4.
The reverend inside didn't recognize this guy. He was just as surprised as you all as what he was doing here.
Yeah, the reverend has never seen, none of them that live here recognize this individual. They have no idea who he is.
Do we know where the man was shot?
Not at this point. When they went to handcuff him, again, they went up, they kicked the spike, this railroad spike out of his hand, turned him over, handcuffed him, turned him back over, and immediately began life-saving measures. The medical examiner is on the way. They'll end up determining exactly where he was shot and how many times he was shot. We don't know that at this point.
Do you guys have any idea how long you're going to be out here?
Good question. For quite some time, as you can, this is a large scene that goes from one side of the gate all the way up to this barrier wall on the interstate. So there are shell casings throughout. So again, it's going to take some time. They will be as expeditious as they can, and we will release that. Once this roadway becomes open, this access road to the interstate, we'll certainly put that out that it's open. But unfortunately, this is part of a large active crime scene, and we're going to have to keep it closed for now.
How long does it usually take to identify someone?
That depends. Sometimes they have identification on them. Sometimes we can do a rapid ID, and we'll know because they have a criminal history. Don't know if this person does. So this could take minutes when we end up doing a rapid ID, or it could take a lot more time to try to go through investigative measures to figure out who this individual is. That's a great question. Good. Just don't know at this point.
And I'm sorry, Sheriff, to
Yeah.
clarify, when your deputies arrived on scene, the man had already gotten into the property?
Yeah, he was on the property. He was already behind this 6-foot wrought iron gated worship center. He was already on the other side. He already made entry, was banging on the windows, telling them that he was going to kill them inside the residence. When he saw the deputies, he began approaching the deputies. He began acting even more erratic and more aggressive towards the deputies as they start those de-escalation techniques. Yeah, that's a great question. The question was, can we talk about the danger that our deputies face all the time? And, you know, it's constant. It's daily. And most of the times they face it and we're not standing in front of a camera. If one of these less lethal options would have worked, they would have been able to secure this individual, this erratic person. We wouldn't stand in front of the cameras. Unfortunately, this person escalated to the point where they had to discharge their firearms, and that's why we're here today. Thank you. I'm sorry?
Do you know how many times he was shot?
No idea. Yeah, we don't know how many times the deputies discharged their firearms, how many times he was struck, where he was struck. We just don't know that. It's too preliminary to tell. But I can tell you he has succumbed to the injuries of where he was struck.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great, safe day.